She barged in the morning. We were lighting candles for my wife's late father binder in one hand, HOA badge in the other, demanding we tear down the doghouse for violating aesthetic continuity. Name's Wes Mercer. Retired compliance officer moved here to disappear. The Marshal ID she didn't notice on our fridge, yeah. That stayed there the whole time. Ever watched a bully quote bylaws to the wrong couple? I was halfway through trimming the slope behind our cabin when I saw her shadow stretch across the porch. The sun hadn't cleared the ridge yet, and the valley was still soaked in that silver morning haze. I killed the mower, yanked out my earplugs, and squinted toward the front steps. Eileen Casterbridge stood there like she owned the timber beneath our floorboards. Binder in one hand, a gleaming master key in the other. God knows what lock she thought that opened. Her lipstick was already smudging into the creases around her mouth, and her bun sagged like a losing battle. "It's 7:08 a.m., she announced as if the hour had some sacred weight. That contraption violates HOA Noise Ordinances, Section 4.9b. She shook the binder once for punctuation, then added, "And per emergency enforcement protocol, I am authorized to inspect your premises." I blinked at her. Because of my lawnmower? Because of the pattern? "Mr. Mercer," she said, stepping forward. "The complaints. The disturbances. You've been observed mowing before sunrise twice this month. I'm trying to beat the heat," I said, stepping between her and the door. "It's August. In Idaho, we get 90-degree days." Eileen's nostrils flared. "This neighborhood has standards. You are not exempt. Now I will ask you." "You'll wait," came Delia's voice from behind me. My wife emerged from the cabin in her DLA flannel sleeves rolled coffee in hand. Her hair was still damp from the shower, and she hadn't even bothered with shoes. She looked like she'd just come down off a stakeout, which, knowing her, was exactly the energy she intended. Eileen's gaze flicked to her, then to the coffee, then back to the binder. "Ma'am, I'm here on official HOA business. Your husband is in violation of Section 3.1, Delia said calmly. "Interior inspections require written quorum approval from the board. You don't have that. You step inside, you're trespassing." Eileen's lips moved without sound for a second. Then she recovered. "I have the authority to cite you, right now. This whole property. Then cite us," I said. She narrowed her eyes. "This isn't over." And with that she turned and marched back toward her Subaru binder clenched tight against her side like it might detonate. Delia watched her leave. She didn't speak right away, just stood there sipping coffee as the breeze lifted the pine sap from the deck. When she finally did speak, it was quiet. "She thinks we're just weekenders with no spine." I sighed, wiped my hands on my jeans. "You sure about that bylaw section 3.1? Delia turned the binder Eileen had left behind. She must have dropped it in her hurry and flipped it open with one finger. The tab was already marked. "Interior inspections require a written quorum vote. You need 4 out of 6 board members minimum." I peered at the highlighted clause. She tapped it once and smiled. "That's the problem with people like Eileen," she said. "They love rules. Until the rules don't bend their way." We sat on the porch after that, sharing what was left of her coffee and watching the town slowly wake. Down the hill, a pair of kids biked past the Ridgewood entrance sign trailing summer behind them. The kind of morning that smelled like hot pine and dry grass. The kind we moved here for. Inside, my phone pinged with an email. I didn't check it. Not yet. "Think she'll file a complaint?" I asked. "She'll do more than that," Delia said. "She'll make it personal." There was no heat in her voice. Just experience. My wife didn't threaten. She prepared. We spent the rest of the morning putting tools away and talking about whether to plant a second maple near the shed. But, somewhere behind the talk, we both knew something had shifted. This wasn't just about a lawnmower or decibels. It was about control, territory, perception. And something told me Eileen wasn't done knocking. The fine arrived on a Monday folded twice and stuffed into our mailbox like it couldn't wait to ruin the day. Printed on thick stock with the HOA crest embossed in the top corner 2 pine trees and a fake hawk, it read, "Violation number 212, Inappropriate Lawn Ornamentation. $50 due within 10 days. No photo, no explanation. Just a case number and a line about non-conforming aesthetics. Below it, handwritten in neat block letters, gnome figurine. Red hat, east lawn. I stared at the page, then looked at Gus. He sat, as he always had, under the red maple legs crossed fishing pole in hand, unbothered by neighborhood politics. His beard had faded from white to gray in the sun. He looked tired. Or maybe I was just projecting. 3 houses down, I spotted a twin. Same ceramic, same posture, even the same chipped nose. No fine fluttering on their porch rail, just silence and shutters drawn. When I brought the paper inside, Delia didn't say much. She read it once, folded it back, and slid it into a manila folder she had labeled HOA Correspondence. Phase 1. We're being profiled, I muttered. We're being watched, she corrected. The next day came 2 more notices: porch light exceeds lumen cap after dusk and flower box installation not approved via Form 14A. Our porch light was motion activated. The flower box came with the house. Neither seemed worth policing. But Delia had already started her routine walking the neighborhood at dusk, camera slung at her hip like a silent witness. She took photos of identical violations untouched. One porch glowed brighter than ours. Another had 2 flower boxes, one painted neon yellow. No fines, no citations, just different names on the deed. By Thursday, Gus had to go. I didn't want to. He'd been there since we moved in, part of the charm, part of the point. But Delia was thinking bigger. She photographed him from 3 angles, took close-ups of the grass around his base, even measured the distance from sidewalk to statue. Then she gently picked him up and walked him to the shed like a funeral procession of one. I stood there feeling oddly exposed. The lawn looked emptier without him. That night, Delia forwarded me an email from the HOA board. Subject line, full bylaws, packet, Reverend 2021. She had already begun highlighting. Yellow for contradictions, blue for undefined terms. Decorative objects wasn't defined. Neither was unpermitted aesthetic. She found 6 places where fines had no stated appeals process. 2 clauses directly contradicted each other. The more vague the rule, she said, sliding her finger down a column of highlighted text, the easier to weaponize. On Friday, she printed the entire violation index. 62 pages, 73 listed offenses. Over half had board discretion as the final arbiter. By Saturday, she'd circled every single one that lacked measurable criteria. It was over 70%. That's when she said it. Not with bitterness, not even with anger. Just clarity. They don't have rules. They have tools. That evening, as we locked up the shed, a new notification blinked onto my phone. Encrypted message. No sender listed. It was a voice memo. "Hey!" The voice, rasped half-whisper like someone recording from a parked car. "You're not the first, but you could be the last if you play this right." Pause. A click. Then silence. Delia played it twice. Didn't say a word. Then she clicked and dragged the file into her growing archive folder labeled Evidence. Outside, the pine trees swayed under a soft evening wind, their branches casting slow-moving shadows across the cabin. Gus was gone from the lawn, but I could feel him watching like some ceramic sentinel buried just below the surface. Somewhere inside the HOA machinery, someone was keeping track. So were we. When Delia slid the napkin across the table that morning, I thought it was a to-do list. But, in her handwriting deliberately neat, it read, Sawtooth Renovations. Est, 2019. Bathroom remodels, energy-efficient upgrades. Cash preferred. I looked up. She was already booting her laptop. "We're setting bait," she said, sipping her coffee like we were planning a picnic. "Let's see what Karen says to a little bribe offer." I raised an eyebrow. "You want me to pose as a contractor, Mark Haynes?" she said, handing me a freshly laminated ID badge. "Regional manager. You subcontract to keep costs flexible. I'll be your tech liaison." I held the badge up to the light. It had a real barcode. By afternoon, we were inside the HOA clubhouse, Delia signing in under the pretense of IT review for upcoming bid digitization. The board had been entertaining bathroom renovation bids for over a month, supposedly to fix the ancient plumbing no one actually used. The timing was perfect. Mid-September meant budget disbursements, and with Eileen already wobbling under quiet pressure, we were betting she'd take the wrong bite. Delia installed a discreet black dome in the corner of the smoke detector. The blinking LED was fake. The camera wasn't. The meeting room smelled like lemon polish and dust. Its floor creaked with every step, and a framed portrait of the HOA founders stared down like judges. Eileen arrived, late, crisp blouse, manic smile. Norman followed like a shadow, silent, slightly off-balance eyes scanning corners rather than people. I introduced myself as Mark handed over a brochure Delia had designed the night before, complete with fake contractor license numbers and glowing Yelp quotes from imaginary clients. We can remodel both clubhouse bathrooms, I told her. Low-flow toilets, new tiling, moisture smart fans. Comes to about $25,000. Eileen nodded absently. I leaned forward, voice just above casual. We're flexible. If it helps the bid process, I can shift $10,000 under table. She froze, not visibly, but enough. Her pen stopped moving. Delia slid a sample tile across the table. We've worked with private HOAs before, she said, tone smooth. It's all about relationships. Eileen blinked slowly, then smiled. We've worked with flexible vendors before, she said. As long as the work gets done. Norman's mouth twitched. He looked at his shoes. Delia kept the conversation going, talking timelines, fake permit delays, hypothetical plumbing issues, but I barely heard her. My pulse was in my ears. The camera above us clicked faintly, and I could feel the moment crystallize. Eileen had nodded. She'd said yes. We left through the back corridor, waved off politely by Norman. The air outside felt sharper, heavier. That night, Delia plugged in the SD card and played the footage back on a slow loop. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just watched. On the third run-through, she paused the video mid-frame. Something in the glass door behind Eileen shimmered. A shadow. No, an outline. Delia enhanced the brightness. Froze the moment. There, reflected in the narrow strip of glass on the exit door, was a man. Thin frame. Slight hunch. One hand gripping a clipboard. Rue. His eyes were fixed on the meeting room. He had been watching. Delia leaned back, her voice low. He saw us, she whispered. He was there, and he didn't stop it. We sat in silence. Was he testing us? Monitoring, complicit? It didn't add up. Rue had given us the financial files. He'd limped into our kitchen like an exhausted truth-teller. But now... Delia printed a still frame, black and white, grainy. She clipped it into our growing folder of documentation. Underneath it, she wrote nothing. We didn't speak again that night. Not about Rue. Not about the nod Eileen had given or the unspoken agreement it carried. In silence, we filed permits, sharpened evidence, and boiled water for tea. The detonator had been pressed. Now we waited. Eileen entered the clubhouse like a politician with poll numbers in her pocket. She carried a manila envelope tucked neatly under one arm and wore a blouse the color of steel wool. I caught her smile before she spoke. It wasn't wide, but it held weight like a closing door. Before we begin, she said, lifting the envelope just high enough for the front row to see, I'd like to share a little history about Mr. Mercer. I froze. Delia, standing near the back with a legal pad, narrowed her eyes. The clubhouse was full 30, maybe 35 residents, packed tighter than usual for an October board meeting. Most clutched those cheap white styrofoam cups half full of lukewarm coffee. The carpet reeked faintly of mildew and something artificial like lemon-scented cleaner and resignation. I had come prepared. Spreadsheets printed. Vendor disbursement charts. A line-by-line financial review, all linked back to Rue's quietly damning folder. But Eileen got to the mic first. Some of you know, Mr. Mercer recently retired from federal service. She began unfolding the contents of the envelope slowly, like a magician drawing out suspense. What you may not know is that in 2012, his agency conducted an internal review of his conduct regarding contract oversight. She held up a photocopied page, DLA header. Intact redactions blurred by poor ink. Alleged irregularities in vendor compliance, she read aloud. Questions raised about protocol adherence during a retroactive audit in the Pacific Northwest. I hadn't heard those words in over a decade. Not since the case was reviewed, resolved internally, and sealed, no wrongdoing found. But once weaponized truth loses its balance. Whispers flickered like wildfire through the crowd. A few neighbors leaned forward. Others leaned back. Delia's expression didn't change, but her knuckles whitened around her pen. Eileen passed out copies with an elegance that bordered on cruel. Norman handed them out row by row like communion wafers. I opened my mouth once, closed it. I wasn't going to win this battle at a folding table under flickering fluorescent lights. I left my presentation untouched. Eileen concluded her commentary, then turned to me with mock warmth. "Mr. Mercer, you had a concern about bathroom remodel contracts." I said nothing. The meeting adjourned 20 minutes later. The room cleared like tidewater after a storm, fast, quiet, scattered. I didn't see Rue until the last minute. He was in the far corner, arms folded, eyes pointed nowhere. He never looked at me. Delia didn't speak until we reached the car. The passenger door closed with more force than necessary. "She got that file," she said, voice like iron through someone. I stared out the windshield. Pines swayed under the night wind, their silhouettes twitching in the rearview mirror like nervous sentries. Delia opened the trunk once we got home, pulled out a small gray file box labeled in her script, "Official Use." She set it on the kitchen counter, opened it with one snap of the latch, and reached inside. What came out wasn't dusty. It had been kept clean. Her old U.S. Marshal badge. Still clipped to a worn leather ID wallet, edges softened by years of service. The photo inside was younger, but the expression matched exactly calm, prepared a hair's breadth from decisive action. She looked up at me. Time to stop asking politely. She didn't wait for my response, just turned toward the hallway and grabbed her phone from the charger. On the screen, I saw the contact Byron M. Fed, she typed fast. Need a meet. Coyote Ridge. Urgent. Then she locked the screen, tucked the badge into her jacket pocket, and disappeared into the office. Outside, the wind picked up. A pine cone bounced against the tin mailbox with a soft clunk. Inside, I sat with an untouched folder full of truth and no audience left to hear it. Byron Meeks sat hunched over the booth table, steam from the coffee curling around his unshaven face like battlefield smoke. The rusty spoon's overhead light flickered once, catching in the cheap plastic badge wallet on the vinyl seat beside him, Department of Justice Finance Investigations Unit. He didn't introduce himself again. Didn't need to. Delia slid the manila folder across the table. "Start with the disbursements," she said. He didn't respond. Just opened the file like it was a crime scene. Outside the diner window, a sheriff's cruiser crawled past the snowy edge of Route 9. The taillights lingered in the reflection a moment too long. Byron didn't flinch, but he watched. I nursed my third refill of diner coffee. It tasted like regret and burnt filters. Inside the folder were 3 months of vendor transactions, all connected to Coyote Ridge. HOA, Lakeside Outdoor Meadowtech Irrigation, RSPM Consulting. Each had invoices inflated by at least 40%. Each had a notation scrawled beside it, Delia's handwriting sharp as fencing wire. Then came the clubhouse audio. Delia pulled out a black flash drive, no label, and handed it over without a word. Byron inserted it into a government-issued laptop that looked like it had been through a war zone. He slid on headphones, pressed play, and listened. We watched him listen. A minute passed. Then another. He paused only once to scribble something on a yellow legal pad with a pencil that had no eraser. When he finally leaned back, he exhaled through his nose like a man standing up from a poker table where everyone just folded. "Yep," he said. "This stinks of local laundering. You've got a case." Delia raised an eyebrow. "Federal, not yet. But it's close. That clubhouse deal, Eileen implies prior arrangements. County contracts, too. I've seen this before. They skim through small grants, partner with silent vendors, and bury the splits under seasonal landscaping. He looked at me. You were DLA compliance. You know the red flags. I nodded. She's clever, though. Plays on pettiness. Hides theft under neighborhood drama. Byron jotted something else. We'll need more. Names. Digital confirmation. If you want this to escalate without pushback from the DA's office, we need someone to flip. Delia didn't hesitate. Rue Seiler. Byron tilted his head, thinking. He's tired, I said. He handed us the folder. He's scared, but not stupid. Byron closed the laptop slowly. I can offer limited immunity. He signs, he testifies, he walks. Otherwise, he's complicit. He pulled out his phone, opened a secure app, and typed. A moment later, a green check mark blinked on screen. Secure Dropbox link, he said. Upload everything tonight. Documents, audio, visual files, metadata, all of it. Delia opened her phone and began transferring files before he finished speaking. The waitress, Gloria, according to the name stitched in faded red, came by with more coffee. She glanced at Byron's badge like it wasn't the first one she'd seen, then disappeared without comment. Delia looked across the table, calm and exact. Do we wait for your green light? No, Byron said. You go public tomorrow. Let them scramble. We'll catch what falls. I didn't speak, but I felt something shift behind my ribs. Not relief anticipation. Controlled heat. Delia picked up her empty cup and turned it in her hands, her fingers steady. This town likes things tidy, she said. This might get messy. Byron grunted. That's how you know it's working. Outside, snow dusted the pine trunks like ash on forgotten ruins. Inside, we reviewed the last of the spreadsheets. Byron slipped his legal pad back into his coat. You've got 48 hours of shock window before they start lawyering up. Use it. Delia nodded. He stood, dropped a 5 on the table, and left without saying goodbye. We watched him cross the lot, boots crunching snow until the headlights of his rental cut a clean swath through the dark. Delia slid the laptop into her bag, then handed me a receipt. Save that, she said. It has the timestamp. I looked at it. Rusty Spoon Diner. Nov 3, 2023, 10 to 27 a.m. Tomorrow, she said, meeting my eyes, we make it public. No emails, no HOA patrols, not even a passive-aggressive citation tucked beneath the welcome mat. Just silence. The kind that makes you check your tires twice before backing out of the driveway. Delia noticed it too. She said nothing, but that morning I found her in the kitchen laying out manila folders, finance surveillance correspondence arranged deliberately in the shape of a question mark. A single cup of coffee sat cooling beside the stack. Thanksgiving was 3 days away. Normally, Coyote Ridge would be buzzing with HOA reminders about winter salt storage or snowplow protocols. But now there was nothing. Eileen's silence after months of shrill control rang louder than any email alert. I don't like it, I said. Delia didn't answer. She just handed me the clicker for the slide deck. We had rehearsed it 3 times already, but she wanted one more. Repetition builds calm, she said. Also makes it harder for nerves to invent false beats. We sat in the den, lights low fireplace crackling. I clicked through the presentation. 1. Financial discrepancies. Vendor overpayments matched to HOA bank statements. 2. Audio clip. Eileen confirming under-the-table agreement 3. HOA bylaws. Violations and contradiction index, 42 entries. 4. Petition clause. Article 9.7 public audit upon 25% quorum request. Each slide had been tested for clarity, stripped of anger, fortified with dates and signatures. Delia adjusted her glasses as I practiced. You blink too much when you're unsure. Slow your breath on slide 3. I tried. Still felt like my pulse was hammering in my ears. On the dining table behind us sat 3 evidence bundles, each labeled in Delia's crisp block print. A. Financial. Ledgers, contracts, annotated spreadsheets. B. Surveillance, USB with video transcript photo, stills, C. Correspondence. Finds memos, internal replies. At the bottom of each bundle, a sealed envelope bearing the DOJ watermark. Byron had sent them by courier the day before, pre-cleared, he said, for parallel review. We were scheduled to present in 6 days. But Delia had another idea. She slid a stack of paper toward me, pre-addressed envelopes. 38 in total. Each included a letter and a copy of the HOA's own bylaws, highlighted, underlined, footnoted with clarity, and a printed clause explaining how residents could invoke Article 9.7 to force an emergency meeting and audit. I mapped the most fed-up households, she said. Ones who've been fined or warned this year. If just 10 respond, we tip quorum. She had already affixed stamps. I spent that afternoon licking envelopes like it was 1995, thinking about how strange it was that democracy in our town came down to a glue strip and a mailbox flag. The next morning, the snow was heavier. Delia bundled the 3 evidence packages and tucked them into a locked steel case. She stored it under the bed, just until the quorum's official, she said. Rue still hadn't replied to our last message. Byron suspected he was retreating, possibly spooked, possibly cornered. That night, Byron messaged us via encrypted thread. "You'll have a full audience. I'll be in the back. Let it burn." I didn't reply. There wasn't anything else to say. We slept lightly, half on, half off alert. Our hallway light stayed on all night. Delia didn't say why. Neither did I, at 5:59 a.m. Just as the first light broke through the pines, a black SUV rolled to a quiet stop outside our cabin. No engine idle, no movement. Delia was already up, coffee in hand. She took one sip and glanced out the window. "They're early," she said, "for transparency." Delia said, her voice steady. "We'll begin with this." She clicked the space bar and the projector screen flickered to life. The room dimmed, not from the lighting, but from the hush that fell over the 70-plus residents crammed into the HOA clubhouse. Folding chairs scraped and adjusted. A few people stood along the back wall, arms folded tight. On screen, Eileen Casterbridge seated at a conference table. Her fingers steepled her expression, brittle and businesslike. "I understand Sawtooth Renovations is willing to adapt their rate," she asked, voice clipped. "That's right," came my voice, slightly distorted by the hidden mic. The board would approve the invoice for 20, but 10 would circle back unofficially. Norman's face, slightly out of focus, nodded. Then, the reflection in the glass door, a pale silhouette with familiar eyes, Rue Silaire, still and ghost-like. Gasps broke out. One of the Hemsworth twins dropped her thermos. A man in the third row muttered, "That's Norman, clear as day." I scanned the crowd from my folding chair beside the projector. Some were scandalized, others vindicated, but none looked surprised. Behind the curtain at the back of the room, Byron Meeks stood silent, arms crossed. He gave a slight nod toward Delia. She clicked again. Next slide, a table of disbursements. Maintenance contracts, vendor IDs, side by side with corresponding county grant allocations. Highlighted rows showed inflated figures. The numbers did all the talking. "I know many of you have had concerns," Delia said, "but this," she tapped the screen. "This is no longer just about gnomes and flower boxes. This is about betrayal, of trust, of funds, of the fabric that holds this community together." Eileen stood up. "This is a smear campaign. You have no legal grounds." Byron stepped forward. "That's enough." He flashed his badge, not loudly, not theatrically, just enough for the front row to glimpse the Department of Justice seal. "Eileen Casterbridge." "Norman Casterbridge," he said calmly. "You are not under arrest, but you are now under active investigation. I'm asking you to come with me." Norman looked at Eileen, who stared at Delia with eyes that could cut steel, but she said nothing. She picked up her binder spine, trembling in her grip, and followed Byron through the aisle. The crowd parted like a tide. Rue rose quietly from the side wall and joined them. He didn't look at us. The moment they exited the room seemed to exhale. Then the murmurs began. Whispers of disbelief, apology, vindication. Delia stepped forward one last time. She held out her old Marshal ID, worn laminated edges, slightly curled, and taped it onto the HOA notice board with a single strip of packing tape. "We're done," she said simply. And just like that, the silence in the room became something new. Not the silence of fear or waiting, but the silence of something ending. The snow had thickened by the time we walked home. No SUV trailing us, no patrol clipboard checking mailbox lights. I passed Mrs. Gibbons, the retired kindergarten teacher, scraping ice from her windshield. She looked up, nodded once, eyes kind. A teenager I didn't recognize from up on Pineview Lane held open the gate as we turned toward our drive. "Cool slideshow," he muttered. We reached the cabin. The porch light glowed warm against the early dark. The woodpile was full. The world was still. Then I saw him. Gus, our ceramic gnome, back on the lawn, centered perfectly, hands clasped, smirking somehow. I looked at Delia. She didn't say a word. Just placed the last folder, now empty, into the fireplace and lit a match. The flames curled slowly around the manila edges. Outside, the snow kept falling. The snow melted slow that December, and one morning I found Gus upright on the lawn again. No chips, no cracks, just quietly back where he'd always been. Funny how justice doesn't always arrive in sirens or speeches. Sometimes it shows up in the quiet after the noise is done. What we lived through wasn't just about fines or bylaws. It was about standing your ground without losing your soul and learning which silences mean safety and which mean surrender. Sometimes bridges collapse so we can learn which ones are worth rebuilding. Has life ever handed you a second chance in disguise? Tell me, I'd love to hear your story in the comments.